Man, I love sports. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and on Twitter. My name is Bryson Carver. Try and explain the last 48 hours in sports just today, okay? I mean, we got the crazy stuff today. We got some news that broke yesterday. We got some wild stuff that broke on Tuesday, which I'll start the show with. But I was initially, toward the end of the show, I was going to talk a bit about the pitiful Los Angeles Lakers. And, I'll probably still talk about Bobby Wagner. But I just out of nowhere, I'm going to have to throw two more topics in there. Because Khalil Mack got traded from the Chicago Bears to the Los Angeles Chargers, which I'll sort of break that down later in the show. But in even bigger news, some breaking news that came in about 2.5 hours before this show began. Sorry for the podcast audience. I will read it for you for the live audience. Here you go. From Jeff Passan of ESPN. Breaking news. Major League Baseball and the MLB Players Association have reached a tentative agreement on a new labor deal, sources tell ESPN. While it still needs to be ratified by both parties, that is expected to be a formality, and when it is, baseball is back. Oh, yes, finally. I did not think this would come to fruition. Now, let me discuss this, and then I'll get to the Russell Wilson to Denver news, the Aaron Rodgers stuff, Carson Wentz, what else we got to do? I'll talk the Khalil Mack trade, but here's my takeaway from it. This, baseball's popularity, we know, and I talked about this on Monday, it's gone down over the past few years, okay? The ratings have not been where they used to be. The popularity of the sport is in a bad place, especially when you look at the NFL, which is not just the king of sports, it's the king of television, for crying out loud. You look at how the popularity of the NBA has only grown over the last decade or so. You look at other sports. International soccer is far more popular, even in the United States, than Major League Baseball. College football, we got the NCAA March Madness tournament, men's and women's. That's more popular than baseball. And so we're looking at it and we're saying, okay, what can you do to try and make the sport more popular? What can you do to market the sport? And while that remains to be seen without a question, what I can say is this. I think to a certain degree, you look at the owners, the Players Association, and they're saying, okay, we're not making ourselves look any better. Let's get a deal done. Let's have a season. Let's not let this drag out to June and have a 120-game season. Let's get the deal done. Let's play baseball, and let's get things going from there. I think I know certainly people were speculating over this on Twitter last night, and I think it played some factor in, is look, we all know how hallowed Jackie Robinson is, and for good reason, of course, not just in baseball, but in all of sports. How good of a look would it be for Major League Baseball on the 75th, it's a big one now, the 75th anniversary of Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier on April the 15th of 1947. How good would that look for Major League Baseball for you to have a lockout and cancel it? Now, in the pandemic year, they still had a Jackie Robinson Day, but obviously it was not on April 15th because the season didn't start until the end of July. But in this case, I think that played in. But again, I'm wearing my Red Sox hat. I am thrilled that Major League Baseball is back, albeit a couple weeks later than we thought it'd be. But it is back. We're ready to go. Spring training, I assume, will begin pretty soon, if not within the next week. You've obviously got some big free agents yet to be signed. Guys like Carlos Correa, who's at the top of the list. My man Kyle Schwarber is still a free agent. So there's a lot going on with Major League Baseball. This is huge breaking news. Once again, from Jeff Passan, Major League Baseball, the Players Association, and the owners have reached a tentative agreement on a new labor deal. It hasn't been ratified by both parties, but it's expected to be a formality. And when it is, baseball is back. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. It's a good day for sports fans. It's a good day for baseball fans. And hopefully, I still have low expectations for the commissioner, Rob Manfred. But hopefully this can be a wake-up call, and hopefully they can do a much better job at marketing their product and marketing their sport than they have in the previous decade. So with that, now to the NFL. On Tuesday, I told the story on Instagram live last night with my man PStar85. Shout out to him. He was on IG Live last night. We were talking about all the craziness going on in the NFL. And I was at school, went to lunch, got my phone out, and saw Aaron Rodgers was staying with the Packers. And I'll discuss Aaron later in the show, actually the next topic after this one I'm discussing. But I look and I'm like, okay, that doesn't surprise me. This is fairly big news, right? Reportedly, he's signing a record deal. I'm thinking, okay, this is the news of the day. This means Devontae Adams is coming back, probably in a franchise tag, which is exactly what ended up happening. And so the day kind of passes. I drive home. I get my phone out, and Russell Wilson's a Denver Bronco. Just out of nowhere. We knew Russell Wilson wanted out, and I'll go back to what I've said for months on Russell Wilson. So I've been consistent on this since about December. If Russell Wilson, after a 12-4 season in which the Seahawks won the toughest division in professional football, the NFC West, a guy in Russell Wilson who is an MVP candidate for about 2/3 of the season before he kind of fell off in the last 6 games or so. If he is two things, number one, looks pissed sitting next to Commissioner Roger Goodell watching Super Bowl 55 as the Man of the Year winner from that season. If 2 days later he goes on the Dan Patrick Show and Mr. Anti-controversial, right, Russell Wilson, go Hawks after every word that comes out of his mouth, he goes out and says, yeah, I'd like to have, I'd like to have a little say in personnel decisions. I'd like to have a little say in what we run offensively in particular. I would like us to sort of change our offensive identity a little bit. Wouldn't mind it. I don't hate the let Russ cook mantra and way of going about things. Oh, and by the way, offensive line, could you give me a little bit more time to throw? If Russell was mad after that, a 12-4 season, which, yes, they lost their first playoff game, and it was a disappointing finish to the season, but it was still a solid season. If he was mad after that, how's he going to feel going 7-10, finishing last in his division, and missing the playoffs by a lot, and his team is in the top 15 in the NFL draft? How's he going to react to that? And so I believe that Russell Wilson had played his last game in Seattle. I said that a couple months ago. I didn't know Denver was on the table. I thought Philadelphia was an option. I thought teams like, say, the Raiders even. You know I love Derek Carr. Derek Carr is one of my favorite quarterbacks. But you would take Russell Wilson any day of the week over Derek Carr. And ironically, they're going to be playing each other twice a year now in the same division. But like I said on Instagram about 30 minutes after the trade went down, we debate as to who wins a trade. We always do that. Who wins this trade? Like James Harden comes to mind, right? James Harden was traded from the Nets to the Sixers, a month ago. And we're like, who won the trade? Was, the Nets got these good role players, but the Sixers got James Harden. Now, I said it was James Harden. That's another story for another day. But it was a debate. Like, it was a fair debate. That this is not even worth talking about who won the trade. Okay, Seattle, and we saw later in the day they released Bobby Wagner. I'll talk about him later in the show. They're in a rebuild. Okay, as it stands today, the two quarterbacks in their roster are Geno Smith and Drew Lock. Yeah, good luck with that against Trey Lance, Matthew Stafford, and Kyler Murray. Good luck. So Seattle is in a complete rebuild. My guess is Pete Carroll will retire after the season. The Seahawks probably won't fire him just as out of sign of respect, but it'll be a little bit like Tom Coughlin with the Giants there at the end. He'll retire after the season, and the Seahawks will be looking for a new coach. Now, it's possible they could be drafting a quarterback. Obviously, now that Russell's gone, is it Malik Willis? Is it Kenny Pickett? Who knows? They could sure use some help on that offensive line. Seattle got some help in that they got draft picks, right? Because that was what they needed. If you're going to trade Russell Wilson, you need draft picks because they botched the Jamal Adams trade 2 years ago. Asking for first-round picks for a safety. I don't care if Jamal Adams is Ed Reed. You don't give up 2 first-round picks to get a safety. So Seattle's in a rebuild. In the case of the Denver Broncos, however, Denver, get ready for the next 5 to 6 years, at least, of Super Bowl contention, because that's exactly where you're going to be. You just went from a team that I thought next year on the surface looked like a probably 7-8 win team. I'd probably be more confident in 8 wins. Maybe make a little push for the playoffs, but no one really takes you seriously as a team that could, even if you get in, you're not going very far. They just went from a last place team to a team that could legit win the AFC West. And that's with no disrespect to Kansas City. I'm not saying the Broncos are going to win the West. But when you look at Denver, they had everything except the quarterback. Now, they gave up Noah Fant. You guys know I really like Noah Fant. I thought he was going to be a piece in place in case they were to get, Aaron Rodgers was the most discussed quarterback, right? Aaron Rodgers, he's going to go to Denver to reunite with his old offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett. But when you look at this Broncos roster, deep running game, great offensive line. You got Garrett Bowles up front, excellent player. Their receiving core, I know people saying, Russell left the better receiving core. No, he didn't, okay? Tyler Lockett's really good. I'm not a big DK Metcalf fan. You've got guys like Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton's one of the best one-on-one go get the ball guys in the NFL. Defensively, you've got Patrick Surtain. I loved Patrick Surtain out of a draft last year, and he had a great rookie season. It got overshadowed because Micah Parsons was, the unanimous defensive player of the year, defensive rookie of the year. Patrick Surtain is an excellent corner and is going to be for the next 7 to 8 years at least. You've got Bradley Chubb rushing the passer up front. You've got Justin Simmons in the secondary. You're set. You are set. You just need that guy. What has been my theme on this show? You can have everything right. Ask the Cleveland Browns, for example. You can have everything set in place and ready to go, and let's go win a Super Bowl. But if you don't have that Super Bowl caliber quarterback, forget about it. You're not contending for any Lombardi trophies. And for an organization like the Denver Broncos, used to winning, obviously they've got 3 Lombardis, 2 from delivered by John Elway. The one delivered, Peyton Manning was the quarterback. No disrespect to Peyton, the defense won that Super Bowl, but they've got 3 championships. They know what it's like to win. They know what it's like to win just as recent as 2015. And since then, they haven't even made the playoffs. Why? Because they've had quarterbacks like Brock Osweiler and Trevor Siemian and Joe Flacco and Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, guys, Bill Parcells called them Jags. Not those specifically, but Bill Parcells calls those kind of quarterbacks Jags. Just a guy. No disrespect to them. They're good players. They're not Russell Wilson. Okay. The Broncos just got a top 5 Super Bowl winning quarterback in his prime. And people are debating today, okay, Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the division. Yes. Okay. You got people out here saying, well, Justin Herbert's better. Listen, love Justin Herbert. Loved him out of Oregon. Said I thought he would be the best rookie or the best quarterback of the 3. Turns out that's probably going to end up being Joe Burrow. Nevertheless, Justin Herbert is phenomenal. That said, he has yet to make the playoffs. And look at Russell Wilson's last few years statistically with a below average offensive line bordering on bad. You heard Russell himself complain about a year ago. His best running back was Chris Carson, and the defense was atrocious. This is the numbers Russell Wilson put up. Let's just go back to 2015. Touchdown passes, 34, 21, 34, 35, 31, 40, and in a season in which he missed 3 games, including the bye week, he threw 25. And even in this season, he only threw 6 picks. Passer ratings from 2015 on, because that's when he developed into a true franchise quarterback. Passer rating on down, 110, 92, 95, 110, 106, 105, 103. Model of consistency. Again, that is with a below average offensive line. That is with the worst roster. In the last 3 years, Seattle's had the worst roster in their division. They've got Russ, Bobby Wagner. I talk about to win a Super Bowl. I talk about this with the Cowboys all the time. This is why I'm not huge on the Cowboys contending, right? To be a contender, you've got to have at least 3 special players. Well, Seattle had 2, Russell, Bobby Wagner, but now both are gone. Now they're in rebuild. But outside of that, defense, awful. Pass rush, couldn't get to the quarterback, right? You look at the secondary, couldn't take the ball away. I heard Greg Olsen, who played with the Seahawks for a year in 2020, before he retired to go into broadcasting, and he's done, a great job at Fox. But Greg Olson said, this is not a shot at Pete Carroll, but that offensive system was really outdated. And so Russell now gets to match up, obviously, with a great roster and a young offensive head coach. How have those guys panned out in the last 5 years or so, starting with Sean McVay? Okay, if I do say so myself. And so for the Denver Broncos, congratulations. Congratulations. Congratulations also to Russell Wilson, his family, and people say, well, he's in a tough division. He's used to that. He's in the NFC. He was in the NFC West. He had to play Kyler Murray twice a year and Kyle Shanahan, that loaded Niners roster, twice a year, and the Rams twice a year with Sean McVay. He's used to competition. He's not going from the NFC North to the AFC West. This is why I never thought Aaron Rodgers was going to get traded to Denver. You don't go from the worst division of football to the best. So, man, this to me, the biggest and most consequential trade in NFL history was Herschel Walker getting traded by the Dallas Cowboys to the Minnesota Vikings for all those draft picks. Because, yes, Herschel was great in Dallas and did some good things in Minnesota, but that trade launched the Cowboys dynasty because they turned those picks into Hall of Famers. We're talking, Emmitt Smith on down. So for the Dallas Cowboys, that was the most consequential and influential trade in NFL history. This could jump it if Denver gets a Super Bowl or two. Not sure if they'll get two because that's a tough division. They're a Super Bowl contender without a question. If you still doubt that, look at the Broncos the last few years when they played Kansas City. Yes, they've been blown out a time or two, but there have been games that Denver has pushed Kansas City. You look as recent as Week 18 last year. Like, Kansas City had everything to play for. Denver had nothing to play for. They were going to fire their head coach. And if it's not for a Melvin Gordon fumble in the red zone, Denver probably wins that game. They beat Kansas City. Yeah, Russell Wilson to that? Whew. Scary hours in Denver, Colorado. And the fact that we get to watch Patrick Mahomes versus Russell Wilson twice a year. The fact that we get to watch Russell Wilson versus Justin Herbert twice a year, and even to a certain degree, Russell Wilson versus Derek Carr twice a year, get your popcorn ready, as T.O. once said, because it's going to be must-see TV. Also, the Seattle Seahawks host the Denver Broncos this season. That will absolutely be either a Sunday night football game or probably a Monday night football game. That will be must-see TV as well. But congratulations to the Denver Broncos, because you have just signed up for 5 or 6 years of Super Bowl contention. Congratulations. But it has been a crazy 48 hours in sports, particularly the NFL. But let me move on now. Let me move on now to Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to talk about Carson Wentz after this, but let me talk about Aaron Rodgers for just a second, because reports are, obviously we know he's staying with the Green Bay Packers. Aaron, after the reports came out himself, confirmed that on Twitter. It's funny, we think about all these insiders that report, we talk about the Schefters and the Ian Rappaports and the Jay Glazers of the world and guys like that, like, Chris Mortensen, like, they report the big news. You know who announced that Aaron Rodgers was returning to Green Bay? Pat McAfee. Former punter turned comedian turned radio show host. So, congrats to Pat on breaking that news. Then again, obviously, we've talked extensively on this show. Aaron has been on the Pat McAfee show basically every Tuesday, going back to the start of last season. But he's coming back to the Packers. This doesn't shock me in the slightest. Like, it doesn't. I don't know how it could shock anybody, because at the end of the day, what Aaron Rodgers is looking at is this. And I kind of briefly detailed it in the Russell Wilson topic, but I'll elaborate more on it right now. Aaron Rodgers, for all my criticisms of his poor leadership, of his aloof nature, of the fact that he straight up lied to the NFL along with the Green Bay Packers, Aaron Rodgers, no dummy. Okay, Aaron Rodgers is an incredibly intelligent human being. He's not dumb. He looks around the NFC and says, okay, at quarterback, my only competition to get to the Super Bowl is Matthew Stafford and Dak Prescott. In my opinion, the only two teams he has to seriously worry about in getting to a Super Bowl are the Rams and the 49ers. Now Russell Wilson's out of the conference now. So he doesn't have to worry about Russell anymore. Of course he's coming back to Green Bay. To me, if he wasn't coming back to Green Bay, he's going to be hosting some game show. Not Jeopardy, but he's going to be hosting something. Okay, he's going to be doing the State Farm commercials with Jake and Mahomes and Drake. I mean, he's going to, he's going to have a great post-retirement. Or not post-retirement, post-career. So, in his division, he gets to play a grand total of 6 games against the ankle-biting, I'm sorry, not ankle-bite, the kneecap-biting Detroit Lions, led by, again, the head coach, Dan Campbell. Kneecap. Biting kneecaps like crazy. He gets to play him twice a year. The Bears, who just traded Khalil Mack, he doesn't have to worry about Khalil Mack anymore, putting him on the ground. He gets to play the dysfunctional Bears twice a year with the defensive coach. And he gets to play the middle-of-the-road, good team, but not Super Bowl contender, Minnesota Vikings, who I think will probably split with Green Bay because Minnesota is still a talented roster, and Kirk Cousins is, while I have my issues with Kirk, he's still, he's still solid. There's no question about that. So the NFC North, there's no need in even debating it. The Packers will have that division locked up by early December. It's not even, it's over. Green Bay is going to get the number 1 seed again next season, barring injury to Aaron Rodgers. They're going to get the number 1 seed again, just like they have the last 2 years, because to me, like I said, I've been consistent on this. The only 2 threats to Green Bay are the defending Super Bowl champion Rams and the team they beat to get to the Super Bowl, the 49ers. Because I think Trey Lance is going to be phenomenal. And I love their roster. But they're going to be playing each other and beating each other up. And by the way, Kyler Murray's in that division. While the Cardinals aren't Super Bowl contenders, he'll probably hand a loss to both of those teams, both the 49ers and the Rams. Dallas isn't going to get the number 1 seed. But, Lord knows, the winner of the NFC South darn sure ain't getting the number 1 seed. Path is wide open for the Packers to, once again, for the 3rd straight year, get home field advantage at Lambeau Field in January, in the frigid weather, in the playoffs. That said, I don't look at the Packers any different than I did a couple months ago, okay? They're probably going to lose to Zadarius Smith. And we saw that, he hardly played at all last season. He played opening day and he played in the playoff loss against the Niners. Zadarius Smith can flat out get to the quarterback. Okay, and that's what you need elite pass rushers to try and go win a Super Bowl. Right? We saw obviously the Rams are the perfect example of that. But for the Packers, I've seen it over and over. They'll probably win 13 games. Why? Because they've won 13 games the last 3 years under Coach Matt LaFleur. But when the going gets tough, when it gets a little tight, Aaron Rodgers gets tight with it. He's 7-9 in his last 16 playoff games. That is the longest streak in NFL history for a quarterback to have never won the Super Bowl. Longest streak ever. So, are the Packers contenders? Absolutely. No question about it. Top 5 quarterback. Number 1 receiver. Probably, in my opinion, the second best receiver in football to Cooper Kupp. Good defense led by a great corner. And you still got Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon in the backfield. By the way, you've got one of the 5 best offensive lines in football. Playing in a horrible division. Okay, Green Bay has no excuse if they don't go at least 5-1 in their division, because they should sweep Detroit, sweep Chicago, split with Minnesota. That should be a given. But for the Green Bay Packers, do I think they'll get to next year's Super Bowl in Arizona? No, absolutely not. Because again, I've seen this movie before. Aaron Rodgers causes offseason drama, just like he did in 2020, just like he did in 2021. He's doing it again now this year. It's always drama. He's going to be an MVP candidate next year. He's going to have an unbelievable regular season. The Packers are going to win 13 games, and they're going to be bounced immediately in the playoffs. I mean, that's wash, rinse, repeat. Second verse, same as the first. Or in this case, third verse, same as the first. Why should I look at this any different than I have the last few years? So is it news? Absolutely. They don't have to go with Jordan Love now. We'll see. We'll see if they trade him. But, it goes back. I saw a meme that Jordan Love is basically the most useless first-round draft pick of the last decade. Basically the only purpose he served was to start a game at Kansas City because the quarterback, wasn't vaccinated and missed the game. And it was a gravel road for the Packers that afternoon when they lost 13-7. But Jordan Love's probably going to get moved. Rumors have said possibly the Colts. I don't know why the Colts will go after Jordan Love, but that's another story for another day. I'll get into them in just a second. But the Packers are contenders. They'll run away with the NFC North because it's the worst division in football. And then they'll get bounced immediately in the playoffs. I've seen this story before. It's going to happen again. So moving on now to Carson Wentz. He was traded yesterday from the Indianapolis Colts to the Washington Commanders, and I'm still not used to it. Not Carson Wentz. I'm talking about the Commanders. Some Cowboys fans joked about we could call them the commies. I wouldn't be completely opposed to that. But, for Washington, listen, here's what they did do. They upgraded at quarterback. I'm not a Carson Wentz fan. I never have been. I always talk about the first topic in the history of this show, carving it up. October 21st, 2019, I did a topic after the Dallas Cowboys beat the Eagles 37-10. And I did the Dak versus Wentz debate. I've always been a Dak guy, never been a Wentz guy. Okay, but even I can say, Washington, you would have to be delusional. Even the harshest Wentz critics, which I'm one of them, they absolutely upgraded at quarterback. Okay, I like Taylor Heineke. He's a really cool story. He's a backup. I would say there are guys who are low-end starters, high-end backups. To me, he's a solid backup. He's got to show me more to prove he's in that sort of Andy Dalton, Teddy Bridgewater tier. He's a backup. So the Colts got better at that position, no doubt about it. And the good news for Carson Wentz is he knows the division well. Obviously, he was with the Eagles for the first 5 years of his career, playing the Cowboys, Washington, and Giants twice a year. Well, now he's going to play the Eagles, Cowboys, and the Giants twice a year. And by the way, how's that reception going to be in Philly? Holy cow, that's going to be interesting. But here's how I look at Washington next year. Okay, so offensively, you've got some players. Antonio Gibson has proven himself to be a really, really good running back in the National Football League through his first 2 years. Terry McLaurin is as good as they come. To me, the true measure of a great wide receiver. And look, some receivers, we don't get the opportunity to see if they can prove this or not. But to me, the true measure of a great wide receiver is what can you do when you don't have an elite quarterback? Devontae Adams, the year Aaron Rodgers was hurt most of the year 2017, still put up the same production. Cooper Kupp wasn't this productive under Jared Goff, but he was really good. Okay? You look at guys like DeAndre Hopkins. Think about before Deshaun Watson, some of the bum quarterbacks that he had. He was still amazing. Terry McLaurin's outstanding. Okay? And he's had quarterbacks like Brandon Allen and Taylor Heineke, and no disrespect to Alex Smith. Love the guy. But he's not that dude. He was no longer a franchise quarterback by the time he got to Washington. Who else? Dwayne Haskins. Terry McLaurin's had some pretty below average quarterback, not even average, but like below average quarterbacks throwing in the football. John Rivera, my man, John, Fan Perspective Podcast. Please go check out their content. They do great stuff over there. But I can't side with this comment. Not on this show. He says 3 words. Let's go Yankees, because for the podcast audience, again, I am wearing my Red Sox hat. In celebration, one thing we can unite on, John, is that baseball is back. Thank God. Gosh, I thought this was never going to end. But yeah, thank God baseball's back. But back to Carson Wentz, they upgraded quarterback. To me, Washington, I think, can contend for the playoffs now. I think they can, because the way I look at it is Green Bay is going to win the North. Absolutely. Dallas is going to win the East. Either San Francisco or the Rams. I'm going to probably side with the Rams because they are the defending champs. Rams are going to win the NFC West. And then whoever wins the NFC South, let's say it's Tampa Bay. Okay, let's say Tampa gets Jimmy Garoppolo or Mitch Trubisky. Let's say Tampa Bay wins the NFC South. So you got 3 wild card spots, okay? Whoever's in second in the NFC West is absolutely getting in. You look at probably the 49ers is who I'm thinking. Niners are going to get in the playoffs. Okay, so there's 2 spots. I think the Cardinals are getting the playoffs. That leaves 1 spot. To me, I look around the NFC. There's only 2 teams I think that can contend for that last playoff spot, and that are the Washington Commanders and then Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota's got a great roster, especially offensively. Okay, Kirk drives me nuts sometimes, but you still got Dalvin Cook. You still got Justin Jefferson. You still got Adam Thielen. So I like Minnesota next year. And you got some good players in that the defensive side of the football. For the Washington football team, I mentioned the offensive guys. Defensively, they had a down year this year. Chase Young is going to be back off that ACL. And we know what Chase Young is when he's healthy, okay? He's one of the most athletic, dominant pass rushers in the NFL. Like, he's going to be back. He's going to produce. He's going to be great. You got Jonathan Allen, who, as my man P-Star pointed out on the live stream yesterday, said some stupid stuff before the Super Bowl. But Lord have mercy. But he's going to be back next year. You look at guys like Montez Sweat, who's an excellent defensive lineman. You got a good linebacking core, and your secondary could use some work, but it's not terrible. They did just release Landon Collins to clear up some cap space, so we'll see where they go in the draft. But Washington is a team that can contend for the playoffs. I mean, really up until like the last 3 weeks of the season, mathematically, like they were still in it. They were still in the playoff chase with Taylor Heineke. Like they beat Tampa Bay with Taylor Heineke. Here's the other side of the coin, though. We know who Carson Wentz is. Carson Wentz and Matthew Stafford a year ago, around late January, early February, were traded around the exact same time, within about a week, 2-week span of one another. And I said for both, okay, we've had our doubts for both of you, but hey, both go to well-coached teams, well-run organizations with excellent rosters. Put up or shut up time. Matthew Stafford's getting fitted for a ring today and is the number 1 celebrity at Lakers games. Carson Wentz just got traded a year later. Carson Wentz's numbers last year, it may surprise people, were actually pretty good. Now, obviously, you got guys, Jonathan Taylor was there. Obviously, I love Michael Pittman Jr., but Carson Wentz's numbers last season, pretty good, right? He started all 17 games. So to Carson Wentz's credit, played every game. He finally stayed healthy over the course of a whole season. First time he's done that since his rookie year and since 2019. But last season, completed 62% of his passes, 3,500 yards. That's not terrible. 27 touchdowns, 7 picks, pass rating of 95. Not bad. That's absolutely starting quarterback numbers. Matter of fact, upper half of starting quarterback numbers. But we talk about when people do good things. That's great. Carson Wentz did good things last year. Does the good outweigh the bad? And in Indianapolis, that is an emphatic no. Colts were sitting right there with a record of 10-5. They had a home game against the Las Vegas Raiders, and Derek Carr, with all the crap he had to deal with the Raiders last season, the head coach, the receiver, the defensive back, all kinds of stuff, he won that game. Derek Carr won that game and outplayed Wentz. But you get one last shot. The Colts, going into the final week of the regular season, control their own destiny. Simple as this. Win and you're in. You don't need any help from Pittsburgh or Baltimore. Win and you're in. 15-point favorites at Jacksonville. And I hear some people say, well, Jacksonville's always owned Indianapolis, right? I think since 2014, the Colts have not won a game at Jacksonville. I get that. But that's the game you brought Carson Wentz over there to do. Because you didn't think Phillip Rivers or Jacoby Brissett could win that game. And you thought Carson Wentz could. Especially with Frank Reich Last time Wentz and Frank Wright were together, Wentz, if he doesn't tear his ACL, probably wins the MVP that year in 2017. You reunite them, you brought Carson Wentz there to win that game. If you're Jim Irsay, the owner, and Chris Ballard, the general manager. And it was as bad of a choke job that I've ever seen by a quarterback. They were playing a Jaguars team, ladies and gentlemen, who had just lost the week prior against the New England Patriots, playoff team. But they just lost to the New England Patriots by a final score of 50-3. The Jaguars won that game, as we all know. They still got the number 1 pick in the draft. They were so bad. You got to win that game if you are Carson Wentz. You've got Jonathan Taylor, who's, to me, the second best running back in all of football to Derrick Henry. You've got an elite offensive line. You've got good skill position players, guys like Michael Pittman, T.Y. Hilton, when healthy at least. Defensively, you got some dudes in that front seven led by Darius Leonard. You got to win that game. You got to win that game. It's as simple as that. I got a couple comments from John. He's a much bigger Wentz fan than I am. He says he had a good year. I agree. He said we all expected more with that team, at least playoffs. And he says they gave up on him too soon. And I have heard that argument. And my thing is this. I talked about this, I think, it might have been a month ago. Like I suggested, how about Russell Wilson gets traded to the Colts? I thought that was on the table because, the Seahawks would get a starting quarterback in Carson Wentz, and Russell Wilson gets what he wants, which is a much better roster. But my thing is this. I think the Colts, Chris Ballard, who's an excellent general manager. They've drafted well. They won games with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. Heck, they won, 11, 12 games with Phillip Rivers at quarterback? Are you kidding me? So from the Colts' perspective, they're like, we can get a bridge quarterback, a Mitchell Trubisky, a Teddy Bridgewater. Now, can they contend for the playoffs? We'll see. They may have a shot at that last wild card spot. But it's hard, especially for the guys in that locker room who are like, we should have won that game. We're playing Jacksonville. It's not like Tennessee. By the way, speaking of Tennessee, Colts played 2 games against the Titans, and I would advise anybody to go check the film of Carson Wentz, the home game. I think it was either week 9 or week 10. Derrick Henry actually got hurt in that game. The Colts played the Tennessee Titans. And Carson Wentz single-handedly threw that game away. He had one of the worst end zone interceptions I've ever seen. He had a big turnover in overtime. He was awful. He was terrible in that game in the fourth quarter. And so, is he talented? No question. No question. To me, he's the most talented quarterback in that division over Dak Prescott. But what Dak brings that Wentz doesn't is even keel, steady, accurate leadership. I mean, there were legit questions about Carson Wentz's leadership in Philadelphia. There were guys that wanted Nick Foles to stay. Like, that divided that locker room when, hold on a second, Nick Foles was traded? That should be the ultimate who cares in the locker room. Especially when you give a guy in Carson Wentz a huge contract to stay. You paid him 2 years early, obviously, as we all found out. But the Commanders are an absolute playoff contender. No doubt about it. To me, it's got to be that last spot because I think 3 NFC West teams are getting in. So that's going to leave one spot open for the taking. I don't buy into Philadelphia this year at all. I'm not a Jalen Hurts guy. To me, he's a slightly more accurate and more fundamentally sound quarterback than Tim Tebow. I'm not a Jalen Hurts. Now, his leadership intangibles are unbelievable. He's a great kid, right? He works his tail off. But franchise quarterback, I'm not sold at all on Philadelphia. Plus, they play a second place schedule. They played a last place schedule last year, and they struggled against elite teams. Washington, to their credit, they did beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They went on the road and beat the Las Vegas Raiders. So they've beaten good teams. They're well coached. Ron Rivera is an excellent head coach. They won't win the NFC East because I think in those games, I think it could come down to those two games that Dallas and Washington play one another. But, I mean, come on, who do you trust more, Dak or Wentz? Like, that's not even a question. A few comments here. My man Grady Edwards is in the comments for the first time. He says, what's up with the Mitch Trubisky hype this offseason? Here's the thing about Mitch. See, I don't want to compare him to Andrew Wiggins because at least Andrew Wiggins made an all-star game. But it's a little bit of that same syndrome. We have now sort of, wherever that person was drafted, we seem to sort of view that person in that light for the rest of their career. Mitch Trubisky, he was way overdrafted, taken before Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. One of the worst mistakes, in draft history. But what he does bring in defense of the Colts, say they sign him, and obviously he'll get signed, he'll be somebody's bridge quarterback. But for Trubisky, he's accurate at times. He moves well in the pocket. You can develop an offense for him. Again, Frank Reich's an excellent offensive coach. He can figure something out. If he could figure it out with an old and turnover-prone, immobile Phillip Rivers and a Jacoby Brissett who's in that high-end, low-end starter, high-end backup group, he can make Mitch Trubisky work. Not to win the division. Tennessee's going to win the division, but they can absolutely make the playoffs with that. Now, is he a franchise quarterback? Absolutely not. No, not at all. And Grady says, Wentz is Baker with a strong arm. Here's the one thing that drives me crazy about Carson Wentz. Like, Baker drives me nuts sometimes. But the one thing that Baker doesn't do that Wentz does, Wentz at times panics. Like, you'll see times in the game where he's just trying to make something happen. Like, he's really kind of an out-of-control Andrew Luck, if you think about it. Like, Andrew Luck threw a lot of interceptions, and, Andrew Luck obviously had a horrible offensive line for the majority of his career in the NFL. But the thing for Andrew Luck is he was at least steady, right? He brought good leadership intangibles to the table. He was coachable. There were questions about whether Wentz was coachable or not in Philadelphia. Again, I go back to leadership. And there are times in games, I've heard some people compare it, deer in the headlight. Deer in the headlights, like Carson Wentz at times, man, he's just panicking. He's making reads, and I'm like, dude, you are 7 years in the NFL. That's mistakes that we kill rookie quarterbacks for making. Like, that's like Zach Wilson stuff right there. That's, come on, you got to be better than that. Like Sam Darnold is I think is the same way. Like Sam Darnold at times makes mistakes. Like, what the heck are you doing, Sam? Now Wentz is better than Sam, but gosh, I mean, I would, yes, he obviously has a stronger arm than Baker, but the one thing I will give Baker is I don't feel like he panics. He makes bad reads, yes, but there aren't times like, oh, Baker's just playing out of control right now. He needs to rein it back in. That's Carson Wentz. He plays completely out of control when the moment gets tight. John says the NFC East just got better. It did. Washington can at least give Dallas a run for their money in the division. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I still have Dallas winning it and Washington contending for that 7 spot. It could certainly come down to the last week of the regular season, but if Carson Wentz couldn't get it done with the Colts and getting in the playoffs, now the NFC certainly is weaker than the AFC, but I wouldn't even say it's put up or shut up at time at this point in Washington. We know what he is. He's 6 years in the NFL. We know what he is. But, it'll certainly be interesting to see where they go. John just has heard Philly and Washington was in on Russell Wilson, but he didn't want to go to their teams. Yeah, he had the no trade clause. Obviously, it had to, once terms of a trade were agreed upon, what it came down to is obviously Russell passing the physical. That was a given. But also Russ had to approve the trade. And he apparently disapproved the trade to Washington. Washington reportedly, as you said, John, made reportedly a massive offer, which you should, absolutely, to get Russell Wilson. And, it just wasn't able to go through. And Philadelphia, I think, would have been a solid fit for Russell, too. I'm not sure they'd have been a Super Bowl contender, but they'd have certainly been a lock for the playoffs and probably, possibly for the division. But yeah, if I'm Russell, I absolutely, even though it's a tougher conference, I'm confident in my abilities as a quarterback. Look, I took some pretty average Seahawks teams to the playoffs. I can compete with the best of the best when I've got the talent and the coaching around me. John just says Luck still under contract. It's puzzling. As the emojis you put right there, like, it's puzzling. Man, I was like, that was one of the most shocking retirements, I think, in recent memory. Like, Calvin Johnson's up there, but when the news came down of Andrew Luck, it's like, wow. But the Colts, with the previous management they had before Chris Ballard, had horrible offensive lines. They never put good protection in front of him. Some of it was he deserves a certain degree of blame, but at the end of the day, for Andrew Luck, he I always said he always tried to make the greatest play ever every play. Like, he wasn't a guy who used the check down a ton. Now, he was wildly talented. The arm, the accuracy, mobility, everything you want in a quarterback, Andrew Luck had. Like, he's one of the greatest prospects ever. But early in his career, they ended it before he really even got a chance to start it. But I always loved Andrew Luck. Grady says, Wilson made a smart move not wanting to go to Washington. That ownership is awful. There's a black cat running around that franchise. No question about it. Washington is one of the poorest owned teams in the NFL. Obviously, they still got the investigation going into the sexual misconduct stuff, and Dan Snyder is one of the worst owners in sports. He's terrible. To me, he's in James Dolan territory. He's that bad. Upper management in Washington has never been good. They do have good coaching. They do have a good roster. They draft fairly well, to their credit. But the ownership is a joke. And frankly, the stadium isn't very good either. It's often ranked one of the worst stadiums in the NFL. Hasn't gotten too many renovations, like Lambeau Field, Soldier Field, like both very old stadiums. I think Lambeau's the oldest in the NFL. I think it's been around since the 50s. I think Lambeau Field looks great. Like, to the credit of the Green Bay Packers, the city of Green Bay, or really the town of Green Bay, they've done a great job at keeping Lambeau Field, still looking in peak condition. There's no excuses for Washington. FedEx Field looks awful. Stadium, the field, everything. And it's poorly constructed. Grady says Irsay should kick the tires on asking Luck to come back until he's 35 every single offseason. Then he says later in the comments, dead serious. I mean, why not? I guess you're not really doing your due diligence. It's why not? Do I think he will? No, because like we saw Andrew Luck, and it was honestly a little concerning. He was at the national championship game because it was in Indianapolis. Obviously I assume he still lives there. And they had, I think, Reese Davis of ESPN, and then they had the two Heisman finalists from the 2011 season, RG3, who works at ESPN, and then Andrew Luck. And Andrew Luck looked significantly slimmer than he had the past. I hope there's no serious health issues going on there, but he seemed pretty content on retirement. He's got a family, and he's got other business interests. I think his dad has business interests himself, Oliver Luck. So I think he's content in retirement. But if you're Irsay, no, I agree. I mean, why not? Worst thing I can tell you is no, as they say. So might as well check. But I think Andrew Luck is somebody who's content in retirement. John says, I've been to that stadium, talking about FedEx Field. Not too bad. I'm not saying it's a dump, but at the same time, like we saw last year, I think it was week 17, if I'm not mistaken. Remember the Eagles played Washington, and the fans were leaning on the railing, and the railing broke, and thank God there were no serious injuries, and all the fans fell near Jalen Hurts as he was about to walk back through the tunnel, toward the locker room. I've heard many. I mean, look, I'm glad you've had a good experience there. Again, I'm not saying it's a dump. Like Tropicana Field in Tampa, where the Tampa Bay Rays play, is probably the worst sporting venue in the world, or at least in the country. It's awful. I mean, Tropicana Field is terrible. FedEx Field isn't in that territory, but it's, in my view, I don't think it's been well kept up like some of the much older stadiums that are in the NFL. Like even Texas Stadium was starting to get a little worn down at the end, and so what did they do? They built Jerry World. Gosh, Jerry Jones in the news. The Cowboys cannot have a normal offseason to save their life.
How about them Cowboys? Yeah!
Not to save their life. Let's see. Grady says, any thoughts on the Barkley, I assume Charles Barkley, Skip Bayless beef? I actually find ironic Barkley dislikes Skip. They're very similar types of people. Yeah, they are. They have big opinions. They're controversial at times. And they got people who love him, people who hate him. Well, I wouldn't say there's a ton of people who are like huge fans of Skip's in terms of his opinions. Yeah, I mean, I know they've always had a beef for years. I mean, I don't know if there's, maybe you know, and I don't know if there's like any new developments in that. But look, both guys are excellent on television. They prepare their butts off, and you know they're great for the networks they're at. Charles Barkley at TNT, Skip Bayless at FS1. I watch Undisputed every day, pretty much, at least when I can. And Inside the NBA, it's I've always said it's the best sports show on television. I will say I mostly watch Undisputed for Shannon Sharp because you know he's great on TV too. So, but yeah. But in Chuck's defense, he's always said he never likes people. He always calls them dummies who talk on TV acting like they know basketball, which, you know, Chuck did kind of play in the NBA, and he was kind of one of the 50th greatest players of all time. But look, you know, everybody's entitled to their opinion. But let me touch for a second on the Khalil Mack trade. Get a drink of water real quick. There's a ton going on, man. Ton going on. But so the news came in about, a couple hours ago, something like that. Adam Schefter, I believe, was the first to report it. If I'm not mistaken, I'll go ahead and check. I believe it was Schefter. Yes, okay, it was Schefter. He tweeted, quote, Bears are attempting to finalize a trade now that will send 6-time Pro Bowl defensive end Khalil Mack to the Los Angeles Chargers, sources told ESPN. I will say this, first of all, love it for the Chargers. Like the Chargers kind of had to make this move. Obviously, they got the franchise quarterback. We know that, Justin Herbert. They just now, locked Mike Williams, locked him in 3 years, $60 million deal. Congrats to him getting the bag. Deserves every penny. Loved Mike Williams coming out of Clemson. And I think he's an excellent receiver. He had some injury problems the first couple of years of his career, but Mike Williams is as good as they come. And so, you know, good on the Chargers for getting him signed long-term. But I guess from the Chargers' point of view, they're like, look, yeah, we got Justin Herbert, but we need somebody to get after Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson. We already had that in Joey Bosa, but you got Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack on opposite sides, so you can't double. Can't double either of them. So it's crazy. And John says you had to shore up that defense. Absolutely. They've got talented players in that defense. In the secondary, they're really good. Derwin James, if he can stay healthy, and you got Casey Hayward, who's one of the more underrated corners in the NFL. But for the Chargers, listen, that's probably the best pass rushing duo in football. Because in all likelihood, I think at least from the indications we're getting on social media, Von Miller's probably going back to Denver. So that's a great duo, you know, to reunite him, you know, with Bradley Chubb. But, you know, Von Miller, Aaron Donald, that was kind of the best duo. But Von's probably going back to Denver. And now you got Joey Bosa on one side, you got Khalil Mack on the other. That is man, good luck to the other quarterback staying upright. But, you know, it's a great move by Los Angeles. It's a great job by the front office saying, okay, to compete with those two, it can't be Joey Bosa rushing the passer or bust. If Joey's having a rough game, you know, now he's not going to get doubled near as much. No question about it. So you get Khalil Mack in the building. He's one of the premier pass rushers in the game. He has been since he stepped foot in Oakland with the Raiders, coming out of Buffalo. Not the Buffalo Bills, but that's where he played college football. But this is a great move for the Los Angeles Chargers. And listen, LA is an aggressive town or city. It's an aggressive city. And they see the team that plays in the same stadium they do, the Rams, and all the moves they made, going out and getting Von Miller and Odell and obviously Stafford to really kick off that Super Bowl run. But the Chargers are like, we got to, you know, obviously from a marketing standpoint, we got to keep up with the Rams. But to even have a chance to win this division, we've got to, you know, one of my idols in the business, Colin Cowherd, he's got a saying is, keep your quarterback comfortable, make the opposing quarterbacks uncomfortable. Well, that's really what the Chargers are doing. Last year, what did they do? What was the weakness of the Los Angeles Chargers? It was their offensive line. So what did they do? They went out and got Corey Linsley from the Green Bay Packers, and they went out and got Rashawn Slater in the draft, who is one of the best left tackles in football as a rookie. So they shored that up. Now, the defensive line was not a weakness for the Chargers. They're just adding a strength to a strength. So this really helps them to at least give themselves a puncher's chance in that NFC West. I'm not saying that they have no chance at all. I would favor Kansas City with Denver in second. But the Chargers absolutely have, if it's not for some of the most idiotic timeouts I've ever seen in that last game against the Raiders, the Chargers make the playoffs, and, who knows what they're able to do from there. Grady asked, what do you think Gronk is going to do? I don't know. It's Gronk. Who knows? I think he's hinted at possibly going to Buffalo, going back to the AFC. He's going to Buffalo. He would certainly be leaving some very warm weather. I know he and Tom both enjoyed that a lot after being in New England for a decade. Obviously being in Tampa Bay the last 2 seasons, but I think Buffalo would be a good fit. Like they've got Dawson Knox, who's a really good tight end, but he's had some struggles with injuries. And so you bring a guy like Gronk. Obviously he's nowhere near, the prime Gronk, but he's still as good of a red zone target as there is in the league. He's still highly productive. And, you would add him to a group that's got Stephon Diggs. Look, they're probably going to move off Cole Beasley for cap purposes, but you still got some good weapons. Devin Singletary had a great finish to the season, and we all know what Josh Allen represents. He's one of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks in football. So that would be a great addition. I think he's even hinted at possibly going to Cincinnati. So how about going from Tom Brady to Joe Burrow? That would be interesting. They've already got the tight end Uzama there, who's highly productive, but kind of split snaps between he and Gronk, and go 12 personnel occasionally. So that would be a good fit, I think, for the Cincinnati Bengals, and even more so for the Buffalo Bills. Bring a veteran 4-time champion, a Rob Gronkowski, into the building, but we'll see. But I would say those are the 2 most likely options for Gronk. He's not going to stay in Tampa. But let me move on to a guy who just got released by the Seattle Seahawks because, as I mentioned many times throughout today's show, they're absolutely going to rebuild after trading Russell Wilson. That's Bobby Wagner. Bobby Wagner, who, if he retired today, is a first-ballot Hall of Famer. I don't think anybody questions that. And reportedly, according to Jordan Schultz of ESPN, 5 teams have interest in Bobby Wagner. One of those teams happens to be, you guessed it. You guessed it.
How about them Cowboys? Yeah!
It's those Dallas Cowboys. It's those good little Cowboys. I will say this. I think he would be a perfect fit in Dallas for this reason. Number one, he's a great player. Great players fit anywhere. But also, Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn was the defensive coordinator for the Legion of Boom at their peak. And one thing I will say about this, and look, you can be as great of a coach and coordinator as you want. If you don't have the talent, there's only so far you can go, obviously. But that Seahawks defense, that Legion of Boom, was it ever really the same after Dan Quinn left to become the coach of the Atlanta Falcons? It wasn't. Sherman, Chancellor, Earl Thomas, still guys like Cliff Averill, Bobby Wagner. I remember Bruce Irvin was on that defensive line. KJ Wright, Byron Maxwell was there for a little while. Like they were still excellent players, and still an excellent defense for the next couple of years, but it was never really quite the same as it was until Dan Quinn left. And we saw what he did to that Dallas Cowboys defense. He turned, along with Micah Parsons, he turned the Dallas Cowboys defense from arguably the worst in football in 2020, certainly a bottom 3 defense in basically every statistical category, to a top 10 defense. As a matter of fact, a defense that led the NFL in takeaways. That's pretty good. And the Cowboys thankfully brought Dan Quinn back for the season. Apparently, they signed him to a long-term deal. So I don't know if he's going to be the defensive coordinator for years to come. Hopefully that's the case because he's, the players love him. But what you would do is you're adding, unlike Khalil Mack to the Chargers where you're adding a strength on a strength, you're adding Bobby Wagner. That's a strength and a weakness. Like the Cowboys are not good at linebacker. Obviously, the Micah Parsons, they put him all over the place. I like him more as a pass rusher more than anything. I think if they do release DeMarcus Lawrence, as the reports say they're going to, you put Micah Parsons on that defensive line, he gets more and more opportunities to rush the passer, and he's in year 2. So that's just even more cause for excitement for the Cowboys and for Micah Parsons in particular. But Leighton Vander Esch is probably going to be gone in free agency, and so that really just leaves Jabril Cox out of LSU. I like Jabril Cox. He tore his ACL last year, so he never really got a chance to have a full rookie season. But you bring Bobby Wagner into the building, who not only is still a top 5 linebacker, but he's also very familiar with Dan Quinn, loves Dan Quinn, and he is a veteran, been in the league for 10 years now. He gets to, he gets to mentor Jabril Cox. He gets to mentor, even more so, the Lion, Lion, the Lion backer, as they call him, Micah Parsons, the young Lion, as I call him. So I think Bobby Wagner to Dallas would be a perfect fit. Do I think it would make them a Super Bowl contender? I'd certainly be more convinced. I still don't trust this organization as far as I can throw them. I love the quarterback, love the defensive rookie of the year. That's it. That's all I can say I love on the Dallas Cowboys. Offensive line isn't where it used to be. Receiving core is good. It's not special. They obviously brought Dalton Schultz back on a franchise tag. I think that was huge for the Cowboys, especially. He's kind of Dak's security blanket. And the defense could possibly lose Jaron Kearse, who's one of the more impactful players in that defense. I'm not as big on Trayvon Diggs as a lot of Cowboys fans are. Grady says, to the NBA, been impressed with Cleveland this season. Do you think Kevin Love is a Hall of Famer? Hall of Famer, gosh. There's an old saying in sports that if you have to think twice about somebody being a Hall of Famer, then they're not a Hall of Famer. I wouldn't go to that extent. I don't think it should be exclusive to the point where it's only the obvious ones that get in. I think you can have a nuanced discussion as to whether somebody is a Hall of Famer. Look, Kevin Love is a multi-time All-Star. He is an NBA champion. He's been great in his role with the Cavaliers this season, but outside of guys like, Manu Ginobili, most role players don't get into the Hall of Fame. And that won't be the reason that Kevin Love does or doesn't. But I would say no. Because I don't think over a long enough period of time, he was a great player. Obviously, those first few years in Minnesota, he was, as good of a big as there was in basketball. But he goes to Cleveland. And by the way, he played a huge part in the Cavs winning that championship in 2016. But he was not the dominant Kevin Love. He didn't have to be. But I think if, say, Kevin Love averages 20 and 15, like he did for years in Minnesota, maybe we got a different conversation now. But everybody, if we talked about the duo for the Cavs, it was no doubt LeBron James, Kyrie Irving. Kevin Love, they needed him to win that championship. I would say no. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. But he's been excellent with the Cavs this season. They've shocked the NBA now. They did just lose Jared Allen indefinitely, so that's a huge loss for them because he's arguably the best shot blocker in the NBA along with Miles Turner. So, that's a huge loss for Cleveland. Can they win a playoff series? Maybe, depending on the matchup. But I'm not as high on them this year as other teams are, or as other fans are. But they got young talent: Darius Garland, Evan Mobley. Evan Mobley's going to win Rookie of the Year fairly easily, I think. And you got a good set of pieces. You got Wade, my man Chetty Osman. I mean, they've got some good players, and they're building for the future. And certainly, I think they ascended this year much quicker, certainly than I thought they would. But they're absolutely going in the right direction. Touch on last topic, and I hate to end what was such a show full of optimism and hope for so many fan bases and teams. Lake Show, Laker Nation. You went to Houston, and you had yourself a big problem. That was one of the biggest laid eggs I've ever seen. I will say this last night. So we know the Lakers are not a good basketball team. That's duh. But it's like the only team they can beat is the Warriors. It's really frustrating. But they go to Houston. Jalen Green drops 32. They win in overtime. I watched the whole game. It was highly entertaining. But the people that I swear, sometimes the media can really overreact to things. The people that are out there saying on the last play of regulation, if you haven't seen it, you can go Google it, go look it up on YouTube. Those that are saying, "Oh, LeBron should have driven to the basket and taken that last shot," don't know basketball. Melo is wide open. Drive it to the basket against a double team or kick it to a wide open shooter. Isn't that kind of LeBron's brand? Drive and kick. It's one of the reasons Melo was brought there, was to play off the ball, be a catch and shoot guy for LeBron. That is exactly the moments that Carmelo Anthony was brought to the Los Angeles Lakers to do. And he missed. That's on Melo. That's not LeBron. LeBron made the right basketball play. And people saying, that's the reason he's not the GOAT. Michael Jordan would have shot it. Yeah, Michael Jordan would have shot it, yes. But to say like that play, a mid-March game in year 19 against the Houston Rockets, that's the reason LeBron James is not the greatest player of all time. Listen, I think MJ's the GOAT too, but this is silly, guys. We're really getting kind of desperate here. But the Cavs are not a good team. They're not a good basketball team. Cavs, sorry, the Cavs are a good basketball team. My bad. The Lakers are not a good basketball team. They're the 9 seed. They're probably going to get in the play-in by default because Portland is the first team out. And gosh, did you see them get to Utah last night? They were down by almost 50. Like the Anthony Simons show was fun while it lasted, and I thought it might actually pick up some steam. And again, I think Chauncey Billups is doing all he can do, but Portland's not making the play-in. It's going to be most likely Lakers, Pelicans. My gut feeling says the game's going to be in New Orleans, and the season's going to come down to a win or go home game for the Los Angeles Lakers. And it's ironically LeBron is the guy who criticized the play-in. He said, "quote Anybody whoever came up with this needs to be fired." Well, the play-in is the Lakers' last hope, ironically. But LeBron's beat up. Russ is out here talking about, don't call me Westbrook. Anthony Davis is still out. Frank Vogel doesn't want to bench Westbrook after initially benching Westbrook. I mean, it's a mess. The front office is as bad as it gets. They're awful. They're poorly run. LeBron, for the first 3 years, was able to mask many of their deficiencies and flaws. Those days are over. He's still great. I still think he's the second best basketball player on earth to Giannis. But I'm not even going to say, "Oh, this is the low point for the Lakers." The whole season's been a low point. Okay, they've had moments here and there. I mean, the 56-point performance by LeBron against my Warriors was one of the few high points of the season. But the whole season's just been bad for the Lakers. A couple questions here from Grady. Any thoughts on Ben Simmons' return to Philly tonight? Here's first, before I get into that, let me say this about Ben Simmons, because you guys know I've been very critical of him. I'll give Ben Simmons this. I'll give him this. He is traveling with the team to Philadelphia. Now, this sort of mysterious back injury that came out of nowhere, which to me, how do you get a back injury by not playing basketball since June? To me, the only answer is he wasn't really working out. He wasn't ready. And so being thrown right back into NBA practices and NBA, conditioning and things of that nature, he was stiff, and that's probably what led to the back injury. I'll give Ben Simmons at least a little credit for having the guts to come back to Philly, even though he's not going to be playing. He's going to be in the arena tonight. That game tips off in about 20 minutes or so. But, for the 76ers and their fans, it's going to be a long night. It's going to be a long night for Ben Simmons. And at the end of the day, look, he brought it upon himself. He did. Not only did he play bad in the playoffs, but for how the whole exit in Philly went, it got to the point where Joel Embiid was openly taking shots at him in after practice and after game press conferences. He had his phone in his pocket one practice. I mean, it was a disaster. I don't think Ben Simmons is a winning basketball player. He makes Brooklyn better defensively, yes, but people say, well, Ben Simmons coming back. Well, that's going to get Brooklyn back on track. They're not a championship team. They're not, okay? They're 500 through 66 games. Like Phoenix has had injuries too, Brooklyn fans. They've got the best record in basketball. Like without Chris Paul, Devin Booker and Cameron Johnson, they almost beat the defending NBA champion Milwaukee Bucks on Sunday. And last night, they beat Miami. Devin Booker coming back fresh off the COVID list. Like, Phoenix just keeps finding ways to win. That's what championship level teams do. That's what championship level organizations and coaching staffs do. That's not Brooklyn at all. Grady says, where do the Lakers go after this offseason? Westbrook gets moved. My gut tells me LeBron's back. Do they move Anthony Davis to try and go get Damian Lillard possibly? Again, I've been consistent on this since last summer. I think Dame and LeBron is a match made in basketball heaven. The Russell Westbrook LeBron fit was a match made in basketball hell. It was never going to work. But Dame, shooter, can play off the ball, great ball handler, great leader along with LeBron James, going to hold guys accountable, going to hold himself accountable. That's where I think they go. They move Westbrook to whoever's going to take that albatross of a contract, $47 million for Russell Westbrook next year. Anthony Davis gets moved to Portland for Damian Lillard, and the Lakers are certainly far more respectable this year. Championship, I'll have to see what they do with their roster in terms of, do they bring back Melo? Do they bring back guys like Stanley Johnson, Austin Reeves, guys like that? They made a huge mistake in letting Alex Caruso and KCP go. But it all starts with getting Westbrook out of the building and, in my opinion, moving Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis, I always call him AD, always down. He's always down. That's where I think the Lakers go. But we just got to see how the rest of this season plays out. But Grady says, I just hope we get Philly, Brooklyn in the playoffs. I mean, it's must-see TV. I would love it. I'm with you. That would be a must-watch series. Harden plays his old buddies in Brooklyn. Ben Simmons plays Philadelphia. He plays at Philadelphia at the Wells Fargo Center in the city of brotherly love. There won't be too much love for Mr. Simmons. That would be a highly intriguing playoff series. And it's got a chance to happen based on how the seating's at, or where the seating's at right now and where it can move in the future. John says, if they're all healthy. Grady says, who coaches the Lakers next season? Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson's coaching days are over. He'll still be around the Lakers. Reportedly, he was Jeannie Buss called on his advice on how to handle the Westbrook thing. Again, I think Frank Vogel is like the fifth or sixth biggest problem with the Lakers, to be honest. I'm not even a big Frank Vogel fan, but the fact that he's in some ways been kind of scapegoated, I think is kind of ridiculous. But do I think he's back next year? Probably not. I know every time NBA coaching openings come up, I always bring up one name, Mark Jackson. When's Mark Jackson going to get a job again? He coached my Warriors from 2010 to 2014, helped build them from a joke to a playoff team. He helped Steph and Clay. He did when he was the coach of the Warriors, 2012. What did he call Steph Curry and Klay Thompson? He said, this is the greatest shooting backcourt in NBA history. And everybody's like, oh, come on, Mark. 10 years later, his words proved prophetic. But I think Mark Jackson would be a perfect fit. They need a guy to hold some of these dudes accountable. Now, some of his ISO ball I don't love. But, in terms of building a franchise back up, winning 50 games, which he did for the Warriors his last season there before he was fired and Steve Kerr came in, he can do that. I think he's an absolute NBA head coach. He's not an NBA coach. He's not an NBA assistant. He's a head coach on the National Basketball Association. Grady says, how do you think Coach K would have done the NBA? I think he's a brilliant basketball mind. I think he would have done, I think he did better than John Calipari. Let's say that. Because I don't think Calipari's coaching style works in the NBA. But I think for Coach K, he's somebody, obviously he's I don't want to say he's an emotional guy. That's more, Coach Cal and we could think of other coaches like Bobby Knight, who is a disgrace to the sport. But when you think about Coach K, he's like the only coach in the world that could have just went off on some of the greatest players in the world, which he did when he coached Team USA. And Team USA players all the way up to the level of LeBron James and Kobe Bryant were like, we're not going to push back. Like, this is Coach K, right? So I think he would have a successful career. As successful as college, probably not, but I think it would have worked out. But listen, March Madness, man, it's coming. By Monday, everybody watching this, listen to this, the guy you hear talking on this mic, we're all going to be doing our brackets. I cannot wait. My Tennessee Vols, see the streaming audience, I got my Vols basketball back there. I think we've got a puncher's chance maybe to win the big dance. But I mean, these conference tournaments, especially in the ACC, have been wild. Leading up to the NCAA tournament because listen, it's gonna be fun. It is gonna be fun, and I cannot wait to see how it plays out. But with that said, that is all the time we have for today's show. Appreciate everybody stopping by. As always, be sure to catch Carving Up Live on Friday, tomorrow, at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live, YouTube, and on Twitter. If you've been listening to the Carving It Up podcast, we appreciate that as well. You've been listening on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Anchor, as well as wherever you listen to your podcast. Be sure to catch Carving It Up on social media as well, on Instagram at Carving It Up Podcast, Twitter at Carving It Up Pod, and on Facebook, search Bryson Carver, and the Carving It Up logo should pull up some way or another. So until tomorrow's show, hope everybody has a great evening. Continue to stay safe out there. God bless you all. Peace out. Dang, bows of the Chargers. That is crazy. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube. Be sure to click that big red subscribe button and go check out the other clips and full shows of Carving It Up Live. Have a blessed day.